Thank you, Rochelle. Thank you, John, and thank you, Sandeep, for your presentations. I sort of feel uh, a little bit inferior here, not just because I didn't bring a slide deck, but because you guys brought so much really interesting information, and I honestly can't stress enough how cool that Newtonian shift game is. I'm a little biased because I've done some work with the EFL, but if we could get everyone in the province to play that game, I really think that the conversation about the energy transition would it would shift 180 degrees. So if anyone listening is a secret billionaire, if you could just fund that, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to cede a little bit of my time here so that we have time for questions for the other presenters, just because I think they've given us a lot to chew on. And like I said, I didn't bring any slides because I have a 6-month-old and he seems to enjoy eating my time almost as much as he enjoys eating his cereal. But I'll use the time that I have here to talk a bit about the role that social media can play in shaping the energy conversation and why it matters that you participate in it. So first, let me be perfectly clear. You want to be spending your time on Twitter, not on Facebook. Now, that might change if Elon Musk actually succeeds in his attempt to buy the company, which came out today, although I actually think that's more about him just trying to create some cover so he can sell his shares and go troll somewhere else. But setting aside Elon's theatrics for the moment, I think that Twitter is the place where you want to spend your social media capital. We all have a limited amount of time to do this. Not everyone is crazy the way I'm crazy and enjoys Twitter. And I don't think it's necessarily a fun or nice place all the time, because it actually can be the opposite of that. But just in terms of maximizing your ROI as educated, informed people, I think it's by far your best bet. Facebook is where you go to fight with your relatives and high school friends and be horrified that they don't want to get vaccinated or believe things that they shouldn't believe. It used to be a more relevant and realistic place to talk about serious issues, but my analysis of it is it's kind of become irreparably poisoned by the misinformation and political mischief that really now defines it. Twitter, on the other hand, is where you can actually influence the discourse. The old saying, you should fish where the fish are, and the fish are on Twitter when it comes to opinion leaders, opinion formation leaders, academics, journalists, columnists, politicians. And as people who might know a thing or two about things that they don't, who have a passion for a super important subject that everyone needs to know more about, I think you can help inform their stories, inform their arguments, inform their values, inform their beliefs, if you do it right. So how do you do that? Not easy, but first and foremost, you do it by sharing good information. And we've seen, I think, quite a bit of that from the other three presenters here today. So maybe that's a nifty chart. Maybe that's some research you're working on that's packaged into a thread. Maybe it's just like a really pithy observation you've made. Try to sidestep the snark and the smack talking that admittedly I can be guilty of from time to time, and work on amplifying good people and good information. And believe it or not, there's a lot of it on there. Engage with the journalists and opinion leaders that you want to influence. Share their work so that they might be more likely to share yours. I'll give you a bit of a secret about journalists and opinion leaders, which is that they like to be liked. And so if you share their work, if you say, hey, their work is great, they might share yours. It's funny how that sort of basic human thing works on a place like Twitter. You also gain profile and get your work out there by being funny and developing your own style, your own shtick, whatever it might be. Twitter is definitely a vector for information, but it's also an opportunity for entertainment. And you should try wherever possible to be entertaining. So use memes, use GIFs, use whatever you're comfortable with. And just remember that practice makes perfect. You're not going to, if you're new to Twitter, if you're not comfortable on Twitter, you're not going to be sort of funny and irreverent immediately. But follow the people who make you laugh and who make you chuckle and who you think are good at it, and you'll pick up some tricks from them. And last, you exercise influence on Twitter by building and maintaining a sense of community. I've been fascinated over the last little while by something that's called, and bear with me because this is not the name that I came up with, or not a name I would recommend, called the Canadian Oil Mafia. It's basically a group of Twitter users who are passionate about investing in oil and gas stocks, especially Canadian ones. And that probably sounds like a super lame way to use your time, but they've managed to create like a pretty impressive following, mostly through the use of the Twitter Spaces function. So they'll have an actual expert or two on, like guilty. I've been on because I wanted to see what they were talking about and push back on a lot of their stuff. They discuss things that are relevant to them in the moment, earnings calls, commodity market movements, and they talk about how it impacts their sort of central thesis. And they're getting thousands of people participating in these spaces. They're from across Canada, around North America. There's lots of bias confirmation happening in there, but the sense of community is unavoidable. And there's no reason why climate-friendly people can't do the same thing, why they can't pick up on this model and run with it, build their own sense of community on Twitter, on Spaces, have experts in, build their own, I don't want to say confirmation bias, but reiterate their values and reinforce them. I'd love to see people in the climate space try to do a little bit more community building in that sense. The good news about Twitter is that it can be a meritocracy in at least as much as such a thing actually exists. Being important or being blue check marked doesn't guarantee that you'll get a lot of followers on Twitter. It certainly helps, but it certainly doesn't guarantee it. What does guarantee it is being smart, being pithy, being informative, being funny, and putting in the time, right? It's sort of like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's slow at first, but it really can pick up speed faster than you think. And this is not a brag, this is probably a confession. Certainly my wife is not thrilled about it, but I've gone from under 10,000 followers to almost 30,000 in under 2 years. And it's just because I've kind of stayed at it and tried to be helpful and good and useful where I can. It's not about being Twitter famous, because this is important work. It's more important than it might seem. There's an entire ecosystem of bad faith actors out there who have made it their mission to misrepresent climate science, misrepresent climate policy, and misrepresent climate realities in this country. They're at it again right now as we speak, with a coordinated series of tweets about a supposed tax on trucks that was in the recent budget. Newsflash, it wasn't. It was a recommendation made as part of an advisory group, but you have this, what I like to call the industrial BS complex, and they have weaponized this and are all pushing it out there to make people believe that the government wants to tax people with trucks. If people of good conscience and good science let these sorts of lies get told unchallenged, the lies start to take on the air of truth. And I think the carbon tax and the widespread public misunderstanding of how it works is kind of a perfect example of this. I've been trying to fight this fight for as long as the carbon tax has been out there. I worked in the climate change office, but part of me fears that the battle is, if not lost, is being lost right now, even though the feds have stepped up their game a bit of late. Most Canadians don't know how the federal backstop works. Most Canadians don't know where the rebate applies. Most Canadians don't even know how it's paid out to them. And this is because of a series of unintentional own goals around the communication of that plan and the deliberate weaponization of misinformation on the other side. I watched us lose that battle here in Alberta in the climate change office. By the time I got to Edmonton, we were already on our heels about the policies because we were afraid to get out there and push back on the misinformation that was out there. And one of the lessons that I took away from my 2+ years there was that the best policy work I've ever seen in my life can get undone by people tweeting pictures of themselves filling up jerry cans on Twitter. It's kind of a lesson that stuck with me. So, Twitter is noisy. It can be a pain, but there are lots of important opportunities on there, to find some signal in the noise. We're in a pitched battle right now for, I don't want to be dramatic, but for the future of our democracy and the role that good information can play in it. I think anyone who attends a post-secondary institution or cares about having fact-based arguments kind of has a responsibility to participate in this fight and push for a world where facts and truth still matter, because If you don't, I promise you that there are people on the other side who are fighting for the opposite. And one of the key fronts in that war is Twitter. So we need as many able-minded people on there as possible, fighting on our side. And I hope to see you on there one day. Thank you.